this is why I really despise a lot of these Western da'wah movements, because they go out in the streets, they convert someone on the spot. After he's converted, they just give him a mushaf. Here are some free books. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
They let
I
him
mean,
go.
I often compare that to taking seeds in your hand and sprinkling them on the sidewalk. Now, will there be some seeds that take root and grow? Yes.
Yeah.
One or two.
Sure.
But most of that is not going to grow because you sprinkled it on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And the people that are often in charge of these dawah movements, they themselves need dawah. You're listening to them, like some of the defenses that they're supposed to be mounting towards Islam. You're thinking, subhanAllah, this person's like, you need to learn your deen, let alone calling other people to it. You need to learn your religion, yeah. But it's the tribulation that happens because people feel like, well, I'm Muslim or I'm from a born Muslim family, and that therefore entitles me to speak about Islam with authority. But it doesn't though. But that's what happens. And as I said, I've said this so many times, but I really mean it. We do this in everything else. We don't do this in anything else but Islam. Everything else, everyone has to have authorities. There has to be a pecking order. There has to be a structure. Everything else, you can't listen to that guy. Why? He's not a chartered surveyor.
Yeah.
Right? Everything we do that with, what, that guy? No, he's not certified. Everything we do this with.
You go to the surgeon, the dentist, you have the experts.
That's it. All this stuff. But when it comes to Islam, no, man.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I read, and I feel, I believe, it's my personal judgment. I am HO in my humble opinion. And that's it. Everyone's off and running. Everyone's off and running. They saw a video, they heard something. How hard can it be? Then they go, well, subhanAllah. And then they're wondering why there's people that are running off to Raqqa and Mosul and all these other areas. Yeah, you made them.
Yes.
The Muslim community at large didn't make them.
Falling into atheism.
The Dawah movement made them.
Yes.
And many of them, they've built an entire thing off these movements. And we have a strong obligation to look after the people that are in this situation, that are suffering, that if somebody feels the slightest bit of doubt to where they think, subhanAllah, I can't look after so-and-so. Okay, then you might not be the person that should be giving dawah.
Exactly.
Or if you get assigned to someone, you have to discharge all their obligations in the same way you would for a small child. You have to discharge their obligations the same way you would for a child, because they're like a child. They depend on you. They need your help. They don't know how to do this. I was going to do this yesterday, but then I realized I don't know how to do it. Now I'm confused, right? It's like, okay, all right, let me help you. You know, you should be spending a lot of time with this person. They should be at your house a lot of the time, or you with them a lot of the time, and things like, because think about what it is from them. Converting to Islam for some people can be a lonely journey because their family doesn't understand, their office doesn't understand, their workplace doesn't understand, their friends don't understand. There may be hostility that they're undergoing. If they're at home and they have their wife at home, or their kids are adults, Dad, why would you do this? Or Mom, why would you do this? It's such a waste of time. Religion doesn't even matter. Just be a good person on your own. You know, there's all types of things they're being told. So then by the time they get back to us, we have to help to encourage them, to tell them it's okay, keep going, you're doing a great job.
Yes.
We have to tell them all these things.
Exactly.
Because if we don't look after them, encourage them, they say, well, if this religion's so great, where are they? Here you are, you're having this problem, that problem. Where are they now? Where's all this great stuff about Islam? You're in trouble, or you need this issue. We're asking these questions, and you're calling him on his phone. He's not picking up. I thought Islam had all the answers. Where are they now? And that's a valid question.
Absolutely.
That's a valid question. Yeah, where are they now? You know, these people get in trouble. It's one thing someone converts to Islam, but then you get the telephone number. Oh, brother Al-Allama or Shaykh al-Islam of this period, I've got a question. Yeah, what is it? Ask me, my child. And they say, yeah, I converted to Islam just like you said, and I preached the way of the prophets just like you proclaimed that I should. Okay, all right. So what's the problem? I'm homeless. Can I come stay with you? Oh, Ahi, I've just got another call on the other line. Can you call a little bit later? Oh, subhanAllah, every time you call back, the mobile phone you have called is switched off. All of a sudden, he doesn't have any time for you. He's homeless. Now, all of a sudden, the men of dawah and righteousness can't find him. He gets cancer. Everyone starts acting strange and weird, and we don't have any time for him. Or, you know, she has cervical cancer, and no one's at the hospital when she dies, and no one's at the hospital when she's losing her hair, and all this other. These are the type of things that happen. All types, because people are coming in all different states to Islam. Someone might be at the end of his life, and he sees the truth in Islam and comes to it, and he's got inoperable lung cancer. Well, someone needs to be with him at the house when he's throwing up, when he might not even be able to, at the latter point in his life, go to the toilet by himself. So that means someone might have to wash him closer to the end of his life. But people are ducking and dodging it. Well, Akeem, my life, I'm busy. I've got to go out. We have to man the tables tomorrow for the stall. It's like, what are you in this for?
Then that's not the reality of da'wah.
Yeah, what are you in this for? Are you in this? Is this a numbers racket? If it's a numbers racket, go play. If it's a numbers racket, go play poker. Because that's a numbers game. Go play poker. Go play Uno. You know, if you really like numbers that much, okay, I'll give you a halal alternative. Go buy some Sudoku puzzles. Those are great for numbers. I use those all the time to sharpen my mind. Go buy Sudoku and play that. That's great for numbers. But if you're looking to assist people and to call to salvation, the salvation that's in La ilaha illallah, that's a protection from eternal judgment where the wrath of Allah will abide, to call to that, then you have to be willing when someone enters into Islam that they get looked after. Because people are going to come in and they've got all types of other things. The problem is when people go on a plane ride or whatever else, they always have luggage. Well, when people enter into Islam, they've got luggage too. They have a stalker that's after them. They've got, a wife that's giving them hassle, or an ex-girlfriend that's still knocking the windows out of the car, or children that are adults now when they don't like the fact that he or she's become Muslim, a workplace that's in their office where they work with haram on a regular basis. Oh man, now what is it going to be, man? There's all these things that you have to consider when someone comes into the deen. And they need your help. So you have to build on this. If not, if you can't do it, then don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can't be the one that does this, then don't do it. Because this is a dawah, real dawah is a blood sport. It's, people, it's for people to undergo hardship. People suffer hardship. But most of the people that are doing this stuff, man, they're doing a John McEnroe form of Islam. Yeah. They work really hard for several years, and then now I lay back and retire off my proceeds. They're worried about clicks and views and likes.
Yes.
And after that, I'm done with my job. Once I turn off my camera, I'm done for the day. No, it doesn't work like that with a convert to Islam, because he's not done for the day. He came into Islam, now he's kicked out. He came into Islam, he got fired from his job. He came into Islam, his wife says, I'm going to leave you. He came into Islam, his kids are crying, how could you do this, Dad? You betrayed the whole family. Because some of them may come from cultures where there's hostility between Islam and like the local population. So now what do you do in a situation like that? What if he's a Burmese Buddhist and he becomes Muslim? He could lose his whole family. Dad, you betrayed the family. How could you become Muslim? Because the way they look at Muslims is not favorable. How could you become Muslim, Dad? You ruined the whole family. Then you've also got Muslims who are wayward from Islam who come back, and their secularist families hostile.
Yeah.
So if they're from Turkey, I mean, those people, they're worse than a lot of other murtadeen. Because they're so harsh on people. It's like the kid is coming to the masjid, one of our masjids, and said, yeah, my parents are making me eat pork, and they say we live in a new age and we have to follow this and that. And yeah, we're Muslims. We don't have to follow everything. He just wants to pray his 5 times salah. He's trying to pray, and his parents are interrupting the salah. Standing in front of him while he's praying. He went into sujood. His dad picked him up out of sujood and tried to stand him back up. These are real things that happen. People come back to Islam that are from Albania or Kosovo, and their local community is hostile. Listen, you remember that documentary I sent you where the adhan was being made, and the guy who's from Kosovo, who has a Muslim name, said, yeah, we really shouldn't be hearing that anymore. That was a long time ago. I don't like hearing that about the adhan. I don't like hearing that.
Unbelievable.
That it's such and such a year, and we're still hearing that sound.
Allah.
Now, what about if you grew up in that environment? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala awoke you to his deen. Imagine what you'll go through at home, at work, in social environments. No, I don't want the pork sausage. I don't want to eat. Wow, what's wrong with you? I don't want to eat that.
Yeah, so a lot of them, they live hiding their religion, basically.
That's it. You're at your front desk. You're at your desk, and it's 1:22. Excuse me, could I just go and take a break? Oh, okay. People are thinking you went for lunch, but you went to one of the back offices and prayed. Where are you going during lunchtime? Oh, I'm just going to pray. You might lose your job. You might get fired. Or they might give you a talking to. What's this whole prayer thing? What are you, a terrorist? A terrorist? What?
Yeah.
See, these are the real things that people go through. Same thing with the Bosniaks.
Oh, yeah.
The Bosniaks were super secular. They're now, some of them are coming back to Islam. But there was a point, if you were a Bosniak, you were just a Bosniak. That's it. It's not, so the Bosniaks were drinking wine and rum and whiskey and doing Christmas. Sometimes they'd even go to mass with the Croats and Serbs, hang out. But you know what? Then the Bosnian War, the war in the Balkans happened. And all of a sudden they woke up one day with the Serbs and Croats pointing at them saying, you're Muslim. And they had the men had their pants pulled down. They were circumcised. They were shooting the men based upon whoever they found that was circumcised. Because as we know, the Orthodox Church doesn't practice circumcision. So people are getting gunned down and killed. So now they woke up and said, man, what is this Islam thing? We're being killed for it. You see, something that they've been saying just on their lips, now they have to abide by it because people are killing them. Makes them think about it now. And it's one of the things that I thought was so poignant in the novel written by Zlata Filopovic, her Bosnian diaries, because she kept a diary during the whole Balkans period. Her name is Zlata Filopovic, and she kept an entire diary. I read that thing cover to cover, and it was really powerful because her parents. I think one of her parents is Muslim and the other is Serbian Orthodox, and all of a sudden now there's arguments happening in the house. All of a sudden, there's people, there was one incident she mentioned where her neighbors got killed because they were Muslims. Like Croats killed their neighbors. It's like, yeah, now you have to wake up to the reality of what it is. Now, you imagine one of these people saying, I want to be Muslim now.
Exactly.
I want to get back onto my faith. I want to pray. I want to fast. And also, now there's hostility. So it's not just people converting to Islam. It's people that have been far from Islam and wayward, wanting to come back to the religion and the hostility they're going to find with that. Some of our sisters are the only ones that wear khimar in their family. They're the only ones that get up for Fajr. They pray alone in their room by themselves. Some sisters is like that. They're the only ones. Everyone's having a full meal in the daytime in Ramadan. And they got 2-3 hours before iftar.
Imagine going through that.
It's just there's a Muslim sister that we knew. She came into Islam, and what was happening was the family. She didn't want her family catching her fasting, so she said, "Yeah, I've." So what she did is she took up weight training as like a hobby to throw them off of her praying and fasting. So she was drinking these, those pre-workout shakes, but she's drinking them at sahur and iftar times. So they're thinking, oh, okay, she's just into some, health nut stuff. But that's what she's having in order to avoid. And then after iftar, after she, prayed or whatever else, she'll have like a meal with the family or whatever else. But this is what she had to do to avoid. She said at one point I had to stop working out so much because I was getting too muscular. Because if you're drinking a pre-workout thing twice a day, you start getting big. It's like my clothes stop fitting. I'm getting too muscular. So I had to taper it down. But these are the types of things that people are going through.
Wow. It's like you say, a lot of people, they don't live in the reality when they have these fantasy thoughts about everything being so easy.
Yeah, everything is easy and life is just like how we say it is, and out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes there are circumstances that have to be dealt with. And people have conditions that have to be seen to. And if they don't get looked after, those conditions become progressively worse.
Absolutely.
And it's an intelligent one that sees this issue and understands these people need help. But you have to see it for what it is. And food is but one of these examples.
Exactly.
Sometimes we burden Muslims, whether they're converts or coming from Muslim families. We burden them with a heavy load where there's more than one ruling. We insist that there's only one ruling, and that's ijma, when it's not ijma.
Right.
But we insist that the most difficult way has to be and should be the only way, when it's not. And people become overburdened. And they shouldn't be overburdened. Let people make their own decision. Well, we just don't want to confuse people. No, you don't want to be confused. Don't assume that everyone's at your intellectual level. Maybe too many rulings might confuse you. Maybe two options might make you have a seizure or make your nose bleed. But maybe Ahmad or Abdul Rahman or Fatima or the other, it might not confuse them. You don't get to decide what will confuse and what won't confuse them and make that judgment. You're not marja. You let the people in charge of the ummah who deserve taqlid and ittiba, you let them make that decision. That's not for you to make that decision. And people have to be reminded of that stuff because they start making these sweeping decisions on what Muslims will and won't. That's not your place. You let the people that are in charge of the ummah's affairs, let them make that decision.
Is there any further thought you want to add, Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah. I have no further statement to make.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan. This was very insightful. Before I move on to the final questions, there was one more thing, which was in regards to animal abuse. Now, what is actually the general rule on abusing animals, and then also looking at what would happen if Muslims abuse animals in a farm or slaughterhouse and us buying that meat?
Alhamdulillah. The general ruling on animals is that animals are not to be abused. Animals, it is impermissible to render abuse to animals, whether this abuse is sexual, whether the abuse is taunting them with the implements that they'll be slaughtered with, beating them repeatedly, or torturing them in the run-up to their slaughter. They also should not be living in pens that are so close together that they're standing in their own filth or that they can't move. You have to change their hay within a reasonable amount of time, because the hay that they sleep in, because they also happen to sometimes defecate and urinate. So that needs to be changed and hosed down on a regular basis, whether it's for your cattle or whether it's for fowl. That should be done on a regular rotation. There should be checks if you're dealing with cows. There should be regular checkups on their udders as well as their body to make sure that they've not contracted TB and other things. If they have, they should be administered the necessary medication for safeguarding. If it's B12, then the B12 can be put in the alfalfa or in potatoes that they eat, right? You have to think about all these things because a cow won't tell you that it's ill. It will either sit down, or it will stop moving, or it will die, or it will start throwing up, or it may start drooling if it's nervous, right? These animals, they don't communicate with verbal communication. It's other things that you have to notice. If they've got something's wrong with their hooves and they're lame, they'll just walk with a limp, or they'll lift one hoof, or sometimes they'll walk on the hoof that hurts and just try to get past it. You have to be the one that inspects their hooves regularly and does all this stuff. So when you engage in animal husbandry, which is the tending of a flock of livestock or what have you, it has to be your job that you're looking after them from birth all the way to slaughter. That's what it's for these people. For fowl, it's from hatching all the way until slaughter. And it's impermissible to do this, as in the case of the man that threw the animal down and had his foot on its side while he was sharpening the knife over it. And Rasulullah said, "Shall you try to kill it twice?" Because this isn't right. Manhandling the animal and taunting it with the implements and these types of things. This is not what it should be. Animals should also be fed what it is that they eat. So it should not be, you should do your utmost to avoid feeding animals grains, because your cattle or your ruminants, they don't eat grains. They eat grasses. So they shouldn't be fed corn. They should not have their ill or sick animals grinded up and then fed to them in the form of feed. That's not right either. Right? So it's a whole process that we should be looking at if we are going to engage in animal husbandry. As people that own livestock or own fowl, we have to make sure that we do so in a responsible and respectful manner of these animals, because these animals give their lives so that we might be nourished and have life.
Right.
And there's a respect that's due there.
And whatever of food that is haram for us, is this also haram to feed the animals?
Well, the animals that we eat are grass eaters. So it doesn't even enter into the equation regarding meat or whatever for these animals, because they're grass eaters. What we eat is going to be a grass eater, and unless it's the case of certain chickens that they might eat gravel here and there, or they might eat corn kernels or things like that. But in general, the animals that we eat they're grass eaters. They're herbivores. So we don't have to worry about their diet per se, other than to make sure that they're not wholesale consuming grains or eating their own feces, which is another thing. If animals get hungry because they're not being nourished properly, they eat their own feces. So you have to make sure that doesn't happen either.
If I may add, besides you having studied the fiqh, you have also practical experience having worked on a farm and with animals, right?
Yes, I worked in a slaughterhouse or an abattoir. I worked with animals. I worked in a cannery. So I've worked with fowl. I've worked with livestock. I've worked with fish of all different kinds, crab, lobster. We did catches. I did fisherman work. So we would bring back, sometimes we'd unload 40,000 pounds of fish, 25,000 pounds of fish. So I know channel rock, lean cod, true cod, black cod, turbot, whiting. We had these different types of carp, right? So we had to deal with fishing. So sometimes I did it socially, sometimes I did it as part of a job. So because of that, and this is another thing, fiqh is practical.
Yeah.
So in that environment, I was able to see the rulings at work and to know, okay, I have to avoid this, I've got to avoid that, or I understand this, or I understand when I cut this animal in half, how to cut across the gills versus through the gills, and cutting across the head versus straight cut. It has to be diagonal, and all these other types of things you learn from being in that environment.
MashaAllah, really remarkable. Obviously, you cannot know this always, but if you know that a particular animal was beaten or abused before slaughtering, would it be impermissible to buy that meat if you know this?
If it's known that the animals, the source of meat that you use to consume are from animals that suffer unduly, you probably should not buy that meat, because it may be meta, or it may fall under the ruling of Soto Madafif Surah 4, where it was beaten to death or gored to death or died from a fall or things like. It may have fallen under one of those rulings, which in that case you shouldn't eat it.
Okay.
Right? Especially when it's established, you should not eat it.
Okay, mashallah, tabarakallah. Now, before concluding all of this, there was one final topic that I wanted to address, and this was in regards to health and diet. So, what I want to ask you is, what foods does a person need to consume to be healthy? What are the most recommended foods? How should one be eating? What should a Muslim's diet look like?
Right. Alhamdulillah. When talking about diet, there are two levels of diet. One is the specific foods that each culture eats that will vary based upon the geography and culture. So that will differ from people to people.
Mhm.
But then there are general guidelines, which is the second aspect. So the general guidelines is a Muslim should have plenty of access to water on a regular basis that he or she should be drinking. It should be had with your meal, right? Your meals should be nutrient rich and dense. So you should have protein, some form of meat. You should have a regular source of veg or fruit, right? And grains should not be a big part of your diet because when you look at the first three generations, they did not, their methodology, the first three generations. So I'm not just talking about Arabs, the first three generations, Persians, all these Muslims of the first three generations were not big grain eaters. They also did not eat meat on a regular basis. They did not eat meat 2 days in a row, right? So it was spaced out. And the meat that they ate was not red meat like beef. It was chicken, it was lamb, it was sheep, it was fish, right? The heavy consumption of beef has come from our intermingling with Western Europeans, but that should not be our consumption as believers as a general basis. It should not be. Raw milk, for those on a regular basis, the consumption of raw milk, if not camel milk, and camel meat is extremely good because camel meat contains no cholesterol. So you don't have to worry about arterial sclerosis because camel meat has no cholesterol. Camel milk is also very good, as well as goat's milk. It's better than cow's milk, not just because it's the closest to human milk, but also because it contains the least amount of fattiness to what doctors and other people always complain about. So if someone can consume that, that would be best. These types of things in general make up a good diet of what a believer should be having per meal. Should not be a lot of grain, should not be, if you want to have something sweet, try to avoid processed white sugar and try to, because the Rasulullah, when he had sweet things, it was honey or dates or similar things to that. A treat is fine every now and then, but it should not be the mainstay. Because these refined sugars, the process of making white sugar is actually removing a lot of the really beneficial nutrients and things from it. So you don't really get the best of what sugar has to offer in its sugarcane form or in its normal brown form. So engaging the white sugar, just like white bread, is always going to be an issue. And as Muslims, we're not just looking for halalun, but also halalun tayyib, the halal and wholesome. So the best of the halal, because white bread's still halal, white sugar's still halal, but is it the best? It's not the best. And as Muslims, we should always be striving to have the best. And veggies have always been and are still cheap. So you can go buy veggies and things like this, and they're still fairly cheap, especially your greens like your Brussels sprouts, your broccoli, your leeks, your kale. These types of things are still very cheap. Spinach, even if it's frozen, it might not be the best as the in-store fresh one, but it's still good because it's greens at still a reasonable price where you can have it every day. Try to have some greens every day, some type of green, spinach, Brussels sprouts, kale, some type of green. Try to have some green every day.
MashaAllah. And should one also have a daily diet of fruits in his diet?
Fruits are also useful to try to have some fruits, because the Rasulullah sometimes had bananas. On other occasions, he would have oranges and grapes, right? These are really good. They're like hydrating things, hydrate you, right? So
inshallah.
try to have these pomegranates are also very good. The Rasulullah
Mhm,
SAW had pomegranates, right? Try to have these things. They're very good for you. They're very hydrating,
mhm.
these types of things. Very useful.
And do we actually know what the sunnah is? How many times a day would they eat, like the Prophet and his companions?
What we can see from their consumption is the times that they sat for meals was sometimes 3 and sometimes 5 times.
Mhm,
And it would often depend seasonally, and it also depended upon the wealth that they had. So if they were under trial or under any
mhm.
difficulties, they would have like 3 small meals.
Okay.
If not, they would have 5 medium-sized meals, meaning they'd have a
SubhanAllah.
large, like 2 large handfuls of a green, maybe a handful of a meat, and then a very small amount of grain if there was any grain, and then
Mhm.
water or raw milk with it.
I've heard some people say that they used to also sometimes have one meal a day. Was this a specific circumstance?
Yes, sometimes they would have 1 meal a day. There were a lot of the Sahaba that had 1 meal within a day. Yes, there were circumstances like that. Yes,
Okay.
there would be that sometimes seasonally, like in the summertime. And if you think about summer because of the heat, they're
Mhm,
not in particular very hungry. So
mhm,
they'd have 1 meal in a day. So these are noble things to engage in. Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Now, inshallah, you've also sent me through some links that I will, inshallah, add for reference and useful reading for the people who listen to this.
Yes.
And I have asked all my questions. And is there something final you would like to add to this whole topic?
What I would say in ending is I would say that our goal is that the food that we consume, we try to have the best food that we can, but also keeping in mind if we live in Darul Kufr, we have to keep in mind the circumstances that we're under. And in keeping in mind those circumstances, we have to make adjustments to deal with things as and when they are. If we do that, we're only accountable for what we know in the given circumstance and not for what we don't know. Let us strive to do that, to discharge our rights to the best of our ability, but also to live in reality so that we don't put unrealistic expectations upon ourselves and those around us. And when we know there's a difference of opinion on an affair, that we let that difference of opinion rest, irrespective of whatever our preference may be.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah
Mm,
fik. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you greatly. I've
Inshallah.
taken away immense benefit, and I believe others will take away this benefit as well, inshallah. And
Inshallah.
I give the final word in closing to you, Sheikh.
So I say in closing, and I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward myself and reward the speaker and all the believers that may hear this. I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts goodness in us and gives us the ability to discharge as much of our time as we can for his service in whatever capacity that may be. Different people have different capacities for what they discharge, but I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it possible for us to discharge whatever we can. Some it might be an hour, some it might be a day, some it might be a few moments, whatever that may be. I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it possible for us to do this and that the food that we take in is beneficial and useful for us, that it nourishes us and those in our families under our care or that are over us in authority, and that it's a blessing for us and preserves our health. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا ورسولنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم أجمعين يا حميد الراحمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك إنه غفور رحيم يا حميد الراحمين ولا إله إلا الله السلام عليكم
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.